The dawn had barely painted the sky in golden hues when Thomas, a 68-year-old man, decided to change the route of his morning walk. His doctors had insisted on daily walks to strengthen his heart after the scare 6 months ago. But that morning, something urged him to stray from his usual path. The new trail was narrower, almost hidden among the dense vegetation surrounding the small rural neighborhood. The morning dew still shimmered on the leaves when Thomas saw something that nearly stopped his heart. A girl, about 9 years old, standing in the middle of the dirt path, her hands and t-shirt stained with bright red. Her large, frightened eyes met his. "I killed the snake. It was going to bite my brother." Her voice was fragile, like glass on the verge of breaking. The blood wasn't hers, Thomas realized, but the tremor in her small hands revealed that something far greater had happened. He knelt down with difficulty, ignoring the pain in his aging knees. "Where's your brother, sweetheart? Where's the snake?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm while scanning the surroundings for signs of danger. The girl only pointed back toward a bend in the trail. Her brown hair was tangled with leaves and twigs, as if she had run through the underbrush. Her honey-colored eyes seemed fixated on something beyond Thomas, as if she were still seeing the scene she had just fled. "My name is Thomas. I can help you." He extended his hand, but she took a step back. "What's your name?" "Lucy," she whispered, barely audible. "Lucy, I need you to show me where your brother is." She shook her head firmly. "I can't go back there." A chill ran down Thomas's spine. The story seemed simple, a brave child killing a snake to protect her brother. But something in her eyes said otherwise. There was a weight in that gaze, something no child should have to carry. "Your brother might be hurt, Lucy. We need to check." "He's not hurt," she said with a dark certainty that made Thomas swallow hard. The phone in Thomas's pocket felt like a ton of bricks. Should he call the police immediately? Or try to understand what had really happened first? The girl was clearly in shock, and pushing too hard might only make things worse. "Were your parents, Lucy?" A heavy silence followed the question. Lucy looked down at her own blood-stained hands, as if seeing them for the first time. "Dad's at work," she finally answered. Mom hasn't woken up since last night." The words hit Thomas like a punch to the stomach. His mind, trained by decades as an elementary school teacher, quickly started connecting the dots. The blood, the snake, the brother who wasn't hurt, the mother who hadn't woken up. The story didn't add up. "Lucy, I need you to trust me, okay?" Thomas made his voice as gentle as possible, fighting against a tremor threatening to reveal his own fear. "Can we go to your house together?" Lucy looked at Thomas with an intensity that seemed to pierce through his soul. For a moment, he saw beyond the fear in her eyes. He saw a cold determination, almost adult-like, that disturbed him deeply. "Promise you'll believe me?" she asked. "About the snake?" Thomas hesitated for only a second before replying, "I promise I'll listen to everything you have to say." Lucy extended her blood-stained hand, and Thomas took it, ignoring the red that now smeared his wrinkled skin. As they began walking, a sudden gust of wind rustled the leaves above them, casting flickering shadows on the dirt path. Thomas had a strange sensation that he was crossing an invisible boundary. Not just a path to Lucy's house, but a threshold between the safe world he knew and something far darker. 100 meters ahead, the trail opened into a small valley dotted with simple houses. Lucy pointed to a faded blue wooden house, partially hidden by tall trees. "It's there," she said, "but we have to go through the barn first. That's where the snake was." Thomas felt his heart pound. Between this courageous girl and a silent trauma, he now faced a dilemma that would forever change the course of his peaceful retirement. Follow his instincts and take Lucy straight to the authorities, or uncover the truth hidden behind her frightened expression. "Let's go then," he said, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "I'm with you." Lucy nodded, and for the first time, a single tear escaped, leaving a clean trail down her dirt street face. That lone tear, more than any words, confirmed what Thomas already suspected. There was no snake. The path to the barn wound through old apple trees that stood like silent guardians of long-buried secrets. Thomas adjusted his pace to match Lucy's, noticing how she occasionally glanced over her shoulder as if afraid they were being followed. "Have you lived here long?" he asked gently, breaking the morning's heavy silence. Lucy kept her eyes on the path. 3 years. We used to live in the city." Her voice carried a weight no child should bear. "Dad said it would be better for everyone. More space, fewer people to hear." Thomas felt a tightness in his chest. In his 40 years as a teacher, he had met many children like Lucy, little guardians of secrets too heavy for their small shoulders. "And your brother, what's he like?" he asked, keeping the conversation in seemingly safe territory. Something resembling a smile touched Lucy's lips. "Sam is 5. He collects colorful rocks and talks to the frogs by the pond." She paused, her fingers tightening slightly around Thomas's. "He always saves part of snack for me, even when he's hungry." The mention of her brother momentarily melted the tough exterior Lucy had built around herself, revealing the child she should have been. "He must love you a lot," Thomas commented, noticing how her shoulders relaxed slightly. "I promised Mom I'd always take care of him." Her voice cracked on the word Mom, and Thomas resisted the urge to embrace her. He realized that her hardened shell was the only thing keeping her from breaking. As they approached the barn, Thomas noticed disturbing details. Dark stains on the dirt path, drag marks, a ripped screen door on the Blue House's porch that was now in clear view. "Lucy," Thomas stopped, kneeling so he was at her eye level. "Before we go inside, I need you to tell me something." He hesitated, carefully choosing his words. "This snake you killed, does it have a name?" Lucy's entire body tensed. Her eyes, previously focused on the ground, met Thomas's with an intensity that made him shudder. "He started it," she finally whispered. "He always starts it. Last night was worse." "What happened, Lucy?" "Dad came home different. It wasn't the usual beer smell." She swallowed hard. "He yelled at Mom about money. Then things broke." Thomas nodded gently, encouraging her to continue. "Sam was scared. I took him to our hiding place in the attic, where Dad never looks." Her small fingers clung to Thomas's with surprising strength. "But Mom screamed so loud. When I went downstairs, she was on the kitchen floor and he..." Her next words were barely audible. "He had the big butcher knife." Thomas closed his eyes for a moment, struggling to keep his composure. "And what did you do then?" "I grabbed the shovel." A single tear ran down Lucy's dirty face. It was leaning against the door. "He didn't see me come in." Her voice was a mere thread of sound. "I just wanted him to stop hurting Mom." The weight of her confession hung between them like thick fog. Thomas understood then. The snake was Lucy's father, and the blood on her hands wasn't from a reptile, but from a man who had turned their home into a battlefield. "You did what you had to do," Thomas said, surprising even himself with his conviction. "Now we need to check on your mom. She might need help." Lucy shook her head. "First, the barn. I need to show you. I need to be sure." Her voice trailed off. Thomas understood. Lucy needed to show him the consequences of her actions, perhaps to confirm that he wouldn't run when he saw what she had done. As they walked the last few meters to the barn, Thomas realized that this girl and her brother were now entwined with his life in a way he never could have predicted when he changed his route that morning. Fate had placed Lucy in his path, and he knew, with inexplicable certainty, that he could not abandon her. The barn loomed ahead, a simple wooden structure weathered by time. The door was slightly ajar, swaying gently in the morning breeze. Lucy stopped, gripping Thomas's hand tightly. "He's in there," she whispered. "The snake." Thomas took a deep breath. "I'm with you, Lucy. No matter what we find in there." She looked at him, searching for any sign of deceit, finding only unwavering steadiness. She nodded and took a step forward. "Sam might be hiding too," she added quietly. "He's afraid of me now." Those words, more than anything else, revealed the true tragedy. A child forced to protect another, to the point where she now feared she had become the very monster she was trying to fight. The barn door creaked as Thomas pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit interior. The metallic scent of blood mingled with the earthy aroma of hay and damp wood, creating a suffocating atmosphere. Thomas squeezed Lucy's hand, both to give her courage and to find his own. "Sam," Lucy called, her voice trembling slightly. "It's me. It's okay." A sudden movement came from behind a pile of crates in the barn's darkest corner. Thomas's heart pounded as a small face emerged from shadows. The boy looked even smaller than his 5 years, his wide, frightened eyes darting across the room. "Lucy!" Sam's voice was just a whisper. Did the snake wake up? A shiver ran down Thomas's spine. His eyes, now adjusted to the dim light, found what the children called the snake. A man lay motionless on the barn's dirt floor, partially covered by an old blanket. A dark stain spread beneath him, and the shovel Lucy had mentioned lay a few feet away, its metal smeared with what Thomas now knew was human blood. "No, Sam, he won't wake up," Lucy said, letting go of Thomas's hand and walking toward her brother. She wrapped him in a hug so tender that Thomas felt a lump rise in his throat. "This is Thomas. He's going to help us." Sam's eyes met Thomas's, filled with awareness no child should know. "Like the man from the store?" Lucy shook her head. "No, Thomas is different. He believes me about the snake." Thomas slowly approached the fallen man. Kneeling, he checked for a pulse at the neck. It was weak but present. The children's father was alive but severely injured, a deep wound on his head, likely caused by the shovel Lucy had swung in desperation. Still oozed blood. "Lucy," Thomas called gently, "we need to check on your mom now." The girl's face paled. "I tried to wake her before I left. She didn't move." "Let's check again," Thomas insisted, fighting to keep his voice steady. "And then we need to call for help." "No." Lucy released her brother and ran to Thomas, panic in her eyes. "They'll take us away. They'll separate us. I promised Mom I'd always take care of Sam." Thomas cupped Lucy's face, feeling the dampness of the tears that now flowed freely. "Lucy, listen to me. If your mom is alive, she needs a doctor. Your dad, too, even if—" He hesitated, unable to finish the sentence. Thomas cupped Lucy's face, feeling the dampness of the tears that now flowed freely. "Lucy, listen to me. If your mom is alive, she needs a doctor. Your dad, too, even if—" He hesitated, unable to finish the sentence. "Even if he's a snake," Lucy finished, her voice carrying a painful wisdom. Thomas nodded, surprised by the composure of this child in such horrific circumstances. "Let's check on your mom first, okay?" Lucy took Sam's hand, and the three of them walked toward the house. Inside the kitchen, the story of the previous night's violence was clear. Shattered glass, broken plates, bloodstains on the faded linoleum floor. Near the old stove, a woman lay motionless. Thomas approached with a racing heart, fearing the worst. Relief flooded him when he pressed 2 fingers to her neck and felt a pulse, stronger than the man's. He watched her chest rise and fall with shallow breaths. A deep bruise covered half her face, and a cut above her eyebrow still bled slightly. "She's alive," Thomas announced. What happened next caught Thomas completely off guard. Lucy collapsed. A deep sob burst from her chest, then another, until her whole body trembled with the force of a grief she had held in for too long. "I thought I killed her too," she cried. "I thought it was my fault, that I was too late." Thomas crossed the kitchen in 3 long strides, pulling Lucy into his arms. "It wasn't your fault, Lucy," he whispered against her tangled hair. "None of this was your fault." Holding 2 traumatized children in a kitchen that had witnessed horrors, Thomas made a decision. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and dialed 911. The simple act of pressing that button would change all their lives forever. Sirens shattered the morning silence like metal birds crying out, filling the small valley with their urgent wail. Thomas stood on the porch, keeping the children close as the first ambulance kicked up a cloud of dust along the dirt road. Lucy held Sam's hand so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely audible beneath the rising noise. Thomas felt the weight of her question. How do you explain to a 9-year-old that her world was about to be completely rewritten? How do you promise that everything will be okay when you don't even know if that's true? First, the doctors will take care of your mom, and He hesitated. "The snake?" Lucy finished with somber certainty. "Yes," Thomas acknowledged, understanding that this was her way of protecting herself. "And then, special people will talk to you and Sam. They'll ask questions." "What kind of questions?" Sam's wide eyes darted between Thomas and the approaching paramedics. Thomas knelt to his level. "About what happened last night. About your dad, your mom, and you too." Lucy visibly tensed. "Are they going to take us away?" The question hung between them like a storm cloud. Thomas knew he couldn't make promises he might not be able to keep, but he also couldn't let them drown in fear. "I don't know exactly what will happen," he admitted, "but I do know that I'll stay with you for as long as I can. I won't leave you." The first ambulance came to a stop, followed by a police car. Paramedics rushed inside with their equipment, and a middle-aged officer with deep lines around his eyes approached the porch. "Mr. Sullivan?" "Officer Mark Winters. You made the call." Thomas instinctively positioned himself protectively in front of the children. "Yes, there's an unconscious woman in the kitchen and a severely injured man in the barn. They're the parents." The officer cast a gentle glance at Lucy and Sam. "Hello, I'm Mark. We're here to help." Lucy said nothing, her eyes tracking the paramedics as they carried her mother out on a stretcher. Sam buried his face in Thomas's leg. "Can we speak in private?" the officer asked, gesturing to a spot away from the porch. "Stay here," Thomas told the children. "I'll be right back." A few meters away, Thomas gave a version of the story with some carefully placed omissions. He described clear signs of domestic violence, the state of the mother, and suggested that the father's injuries were from a fall during a struggle. He wasn't exactly lying, just leaving out Lucy's role in it, at least for now. "I found the girl on the trail this morning," Thomas explained. "She led me here." "Did you know the family before today?" the officer asked, jotting down notes. "No, never seen them before. I live across the valley. I'm a retired teacher." Their conversation was interrupted by movement at the door. Paramedics wheeled Lucy's mother out, her face partially covered by an oxygen mask, but her eyes were open. She frantically searched the yard until she spotted the children. "Mom!" Lucy cried, her voice a mixture of relief and terror as she ran toward the stretcher. One of the paramedics tried to block her, but Thomas intervened. "Please, let her come closer." She thought her mother was dead. The woman on the stretcher stretched out a trembling hand, brushing her fingers against Lucy's cheek. A single tear slid down her temple as her lips moved beneath the mask. "I love you too," Lucy whispered, as if she could read the words. Sam clung to Lucy, and for a brief moment, mother and children were reunited in a fragile, desperate embrace before the paramedics had to move her. "We're taking her to regional hospital," one of them informed Thomas. "You can follow in the squad car." Thomas felt the weight of an impossible decision on his shoulders. Should he tell the truth now, or protect Lucy for as long as possible? Then, the second stretcher emerged from the barn, carrying the father. The moment Lucy saw him, her entire body stiffened, her face draining of color. "Don't let him see me," she whispered, clutching Thomas's shirt. "Don't let him see me." Thomas wrapped an arm around her. In that moment, he knew there was no easy choice, only the right one, no matter how painful. The hospital waiting room buzzed with the rhythm of hurried footsteps and hushed conversations. Thomas sat with Lucy and Sam curled up beside him, both exhausted from the emotional whirlwind of the last few hours. Across from him, a woman in her 50s with kind but sharp eyes approached, offering him a cup of coffee. "I'm Jennifer," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I'm with Child Protective Services." Thomas took the cup, his hands trembling slightly. "How's their mother?" "The doctors are cautiously optimistic," Jennifer answered. "She has a long recovery ahead, but she should survive." Thomas let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "And their father?" "He's in surgery. The head wound was severe, but he's expected to make it." She hesitated, studying Thomas. "The officer said there are some gaps in your story." Thomas stared into the dark liquid in his cup. The weight of unspoken truth pressed down on him like a stone. "I didn't tell you everything." "I suspected as much," Jennifer said without judgment. "I'm here to protect these kids, Mr. Sullivan. I need to know what really happened." Thomas closed his eyes for a moment, picturing Lucy standing on that trail, her small hands stained red. "It was Lucy," he finally admitted. "She hit her father with the shovel, not a fall. She was protecting her mother." Jennifer absorbed the information in silence, her face unreadable. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I once kept silent when I shouldn't have," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "And it cost me my daughter's life." Jennifer remained still, waiting. Her name was Catherine. She was 17, brilliant, full of life. Thomas looked down at his wrinkled hands. Her boyfriend, Michael, was charming when he wanted to be. One day, I noticed bruises on her arms. She said it was an accident. I chose to believe her. A lone tear slipped down his cheek. 3 months later, he pushed her down a flight of stairs during an argument. She didn't survive. Jennifer reached out and squeezed his arm gently. "I'm so sorry. I've walked the same path every morning since then, like a penance. Today, for the first time in 15 years, I took a different route." Thomas looked at the sleeping children. "And I found Lucy." "Maybe it wasn't a coincidence," Jennifer murmured. Before Thomas could respond, Lucy stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She saw the adults talking and immediately tensed. "You told," she said, not accusing, just stating a fact. Thomas nodded. "Yes, Lucy. I had to tell the truth." "Are they going to take me to jail now?" she asked with heartbreaking simplicity. Jennifer knelt in front of her. "No, sweetheart. No one is taking you to jail. You were protecting your family." Lucy's gaze flickered to Sam, still asleep. "What's going to happen to us?" "For now, you'll stay somewhere safe, with people who will take good care of you until your mom gets better." "Together?" Lucy's voice wavered slightly. "Together," Jennifer promised. Just then, a nurse rushed in. "Mr. Sullivan, you have an urgent call at the nurse's station. It's about Mr. Wilson." Thomas frowned. "You must have the wrong person. I don't know any Mr. Wilson." The nurse shook her head. "The man said it was urgent, about your past." A cold dread settled over Thomas as he followed her down the hall. He picked up the phone with hesitant fingers. "Hello?" Thomas Sullivan, a deep, professional voice answered. "I'm Detective James Carter. We're investigating the Reed family case." "Reed?" Thomas repeated. "Yes, the father. His real name is Michael Wilson. 15 years ago, he was under investigation for murder." Thomas's blood ran cold. "Murder?" "Yes," the detective confirmed. "Michael Wilson was the man involved in your daughter's death." Fate hadn't just changed his path that morning. It had closed a perfect, terrible circle. The phone nearly slipped from Thomas's trembling fingers. The room seemed to spin around him as the truth crashed down like a collapsing wall. Michael Wilson, the man who had destroyed his life, the man responsible for Catherine's death, had been hiding in plain sight all along, under a new name, with a new family. And Lucy, Sam, they were his children. Thomas staggered back, gripping the counter for support. "Mr. Sullivan," the detective's voice pulled him back. "Are you still there?" Thomas swallowed hard, his throat dry as dust. "I had no idea. Until now," There was silence on the other end of the line. Then the detective spoke again, his tone measured. I understand this must be a shock, but we need your cooperation. We have enough to bring Wilson to justice for what happened to your daughter. This time, he won't walk away. Thomas clenched his jaw. He had spent 15 years haunted by grief, by the weight of his silence. The idea that justice might finally be served should have brought him relief. But all he could think about were two terrified children hiding in a hospital waiting room. Lucy and Sam weren't their father. Mr. Sullivan? Thomas exhaled shakily. What do you need me to do? He returned to the waiting room, his pulse still unsteady. Jennifer immediately noticed something was wrong. Thomas? She asked, concern in her voice. What happened? Lucy stood up, gripping Sam's hand, her eyes scanning his face with suspicion. You know something. Thomas knelt before her, searching for the right words. Lucy, your dad. He hesitated, feeling the weight of every word before finally saying, his real name was Michael Wilson. Lucy's face barely changed, but her fingers tightened around Sam's. I know. Thomas blinked, caught off guard. You. He used to get mad when Mom called him that. Lucy admitted quietly, said it wasn't his name anymore. She had always known. Maybe not the full truth, but she had known enough. He hurt someone a long time ago. Thomas continued gently. Someone I loved. Lucy's lip trembled, but she held his gaze. And now you hate me too. The heartbreak in her voice shattered something inside him. He reached out, placing a hand over hers. No, Lucy, never. His voice was firm, unwavering. You are not him. You are not his mistakes. Tears welled in Lucy's eyes. But I have his blood. Thomas shook his head. You have your mother's heart. You have your own choices. And you chose to protect your family. That's who you are. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't pull away. Jennifer cleared her throat softly. Thomas, what happens next is complicated. But I believe, given everything, that Lucy and Sam shouldn't be separated. Lucy turned to her, fear flashing in her eyes. Are you taking us away? Jennifer crouched to her level. Not if I can help it, she said gently. Right now, we need to make sure you're safe. Your mom is getting stronger, but she needs time. Lucy swallowed hard. Can we stay with Thomas? Jennifer hesitated, glancing at Thomas. His heart ached. He wanted to say yes. But could he really give them what they needed? He was an old man, living alone in a small house. But as he looked at Lucy, at the way she clung to Sam, at the quiet, exhausted hope in her eyes, he already knew his answer. If that's what you want, he said, his voice thick with emotion, then I'll fight for it. Lucy let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, and for the first time since he met her, she allowed herself to believe in something better. 3 months later, the path where Thomas had first found Lucy looked different. Summer had arrived, dressing the valley in wildflowers. Along the dirt trail, small sunflower sprouts pushed through the soil, reaching for the sky. Lucy knelt, her small hands carefully patting the earth around one of the seedlings. Do you think they'll grow tall? She asked, brushing a strand of hair from her dirt-streaked face. Thomas smiled, warmth spreading in his chest. Taller than you, for sure. By the end of summer, they'll be looking down at you. A few meters away, Sam ran, chasing a butterfly with the carefree joy of a child who no longer lived in fear. He had been the first to adjust to their new life. For him, the small wooden cabin in the valley had simply become home, a word he spoke with easy certainty. Justice had followed its course. Michael Wilson, still known in Thomas's mind as the Snake, was facing charges not only for what he had done to Lucy's mother, but also for Catherine's death. 15 years of running under false names, dragging his family from town to town, had finally come to an end. Mom called while you were at the market, Lucy said, pressing the soil gently with her fingertips. She's coming on Sunday. Rachel Reed, now using her maiden name Bennett, had made incredible progress. After weeks in the hospital and another month in a recovery center for domestic violence survivors, she was slowly rebuilding her life. Her weekly visits with her children were the foundation of her healing, just as therapy was beginning to untangle the years of fear and control. "Great. I'll bake that apple pie she likes," Thomas replied, kneeling beside Lucy to help her plant the next sprout. Lucy paused, looking at him with that deep, searching intensity she had. "Do you think she'll take us back one day?" The question hung between them, filled with quiet anxiety. For now, the courts had placed Thomas as the children's legal guardian while Rachel recovered. It had been meant as a temporary solution, but with each passing day, it felt more and more like home. "Your mom loves you more than anything, Lucy," Thomas said carefully. "And no matter what she decides, you'll always have a place with me. Always." Lucy nodded, absorbing his words. She was still learning to trust, to believe in stability after a lifetime of chaos. "She likes the lake house," Lucy murmured after a moment. "Maybe we could all live there. Together." Thomas felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Maybe," he said softly. "Time will tell." Sam came running toward them, his cheeks flushed with excitement. Thomas, I found a frog. Come see." Thomas chuckled, pushing himself to his feet. His knees ached, but he welcomed the familiar pain. What a difference a few months had made. His morning walks, once a lonely ritual of grief, had become adventures with Lucy and Sam. The quiet meals in his cabin were now filled with laughter and conversation. The house that had once been empty was now filled with life. Lucy stood beside him, watching as Sam proudly displayed his tiny frog. "He looks happy here," she observed. "Like us," Sam said simply. Thomas felt his eyes sting. In that moment, between sunflowers, small hands planting hope, and a green frog perched on Sam's fingers, he finally understood. Fate hadn't just closed a circle of pain. It had opened a new one. One of healing, one of love, one of home. "Come on," Thomas said, extending his hands toward them. "We have a pie to make." As they walked back, Lucy glanced one last time at the sunflowers. One day, they would stand tall, reaching for the sky, not despite the storms they had faced, but because of them, just like her, just like all of them. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments. We want to hear how Thomas, Lucy, and Sam's journey made you feel. If you enjoyed this emotional and intense narrative, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories about the human spirit. Your support helps us continue bringing these transformative stories to you. Until our next emotional adventure,